The format for this session is that we have 2 sessions planned. The first hour, we will be discussing the coastal regulation proposal, specifically land subject to coastal storm flowage and other coastal proposals that we have included in the draft regulation package. We'll talk for about 25 minutes, and then we look to provide about a half an hour for questions and answers. And we ask that you keep your questions short, like a minute or less, and that you keep them more general, not project specific. The second session will start at about 2 o'clock, and we will discuss the stormwater proposed regulations, and it will be the same format, about a half an hour session, followed by questions and answers for about 30 minutes. After that, concluding at about 3 o'clock. We'd like to get through all the presentation first before taking questions. So if you have an urgent pressing clarification question, please, you can ask that, but we would like to take the questions at the end of each presentation, and feel free to put your questions in the chat. We'll take them in order. With that, I'd like to also encourage you to, there are 3 information sessions. One of them is now there's one tonight at 6 o'clock, and then there's a third one on January 23rd. I believe that one's at 1 p.m. So we encourage you to attend as many as you'd like to make sure that, you get your questions answered. And with that, I'm going to, we'll start our presentation, and I want to introduce the team that is with me today to present the coastal regulations. That includes Jill Provençal, who is our Wetlands Section Chief of the Northeast Regional Office of MassDEP, Pam Harvey, who has been with MassDEP for many years and was brought back from retirement specifically for this project, and myself, I'm Lisa Rhodes, the MassDEP Wetlands Program Chief. Next slide, Jill.
Lisa, while you're switching slides, if I may, pardon the interruption, if this is probably obvious to many folks, but I just want to make sure that we underscore this. We are really grateful for your participation in one or more of these information sessions and then at the official public hearings. But we just want to make sure that you understand that any input that we get here, while it is great to help us understand your questions about the regulations, proposed regulations, it doesn't substitute for actually having you or your organization or agency or firm submit official public comments during the public comment period. And we'll go through that more in detail, but just want to make sure that that's clear. And the public comment period has been extended beyond the normal, and that ends March 1st. And we'll review all that later, but just want to make that clear.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. So the agenda for this first session on coastal regulations is, I'm going to provide a very brief introduction and need for these regulations, followed by Jill Provençal will talk about the land subject to coastal storm flowage functions and how we need to learn from past storms. Then Pam Harvey will dive into the proposed standards for land subject to coastal storm flowage, as well as the additional coastal resilience regulations that we're proposing. And then we'll go over the schedule and how you can comment. Next slide, Jill. So the new standards that are proposed in land subject to coastal storm flowage are intended to improve designs in the coastal floodplain or the land subject to coastal storm flowage to reduce existing and increasing risk due to stronger coastal storms, sea level rise, and increasing precipitation. And the new standards are intended to reduce storm and flood damage on development and infrastructure, which is very important, to reduce risk to public health and safety, and to protect the natural function of the coastal floodplain. Next, Jill. And so, many of you know that we have been working on these standards for a number of years, even though land subject to coastal storm flowage has been a protected wetland protection act resource area since the very beginning. But we've never had specific standards for this resource area. And we've learned over these years that the importance of having these standards is not just for environmental reasons, but it's also important for economic reasons. And this was highlighted in a report in Commonwealth Magazine last year, or in October of 2022, where they discussed the big three credit rating agencies, how they gave Massachusetts mostly good ratings, but noted that there's a counterweight in the state's vulnerability to coastal storms and flooding. And specifically, the S&P rating in 2022 specifically noted that Massachusetts environmental risks were moderately negative in the credit rating analysis because of our coastal exposure. Specifically in the combined Boston and Cape Cod area, exposing the state to significant economic disruption following a high impact event. So implementing strong and new standards in land subject to coastal storm flowage not only makes environmental sense, but it makes economic sense, for a strong Massachusetts in general. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to Jill to talk about how land subject to coastal storm flowage functions and what we've learned from past storms.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So land subject to coastal storm flowage. As we know, this coastal resource area has the ability to diminish and buffer the high energy effects of storms by absorbing wave energy and floodwater, reducing erosion and dissipating storm flow energy. So within land subject to coastal storm flowage, we have several FEMA flood zones. I think you can see my cursor. So the velocity zone, or V zone, is also known as the coastal high hazard area. And the V zone boundaries are determined by reference to the currently effective or preliminary firm map prepared by FEMA. These areas are subject to high velocity wave action from storms and have projected wave heights of 3 foot or greater, or at least 3 feet of runoff. Landward of the velocity zone is the MOA, or the area of moderate wave action, also considered a high hazard area of the A zone. These areas experience wave heights between 1.5 feet and 3 feet, storm surge, and wave runoff. Then landward of the MOA is the MEWA, or area of minimal wave action, also located within the A zone. And this area is considered the lower hazard portion of the A zone and is subject to wave heights less than 1.5 feet during the 1% annual flood chance flood. Then you'll see this boundary here. And this is the boundary between the MOA and the MEWA. It's called the LIMWA, or limit of wave action. Just a note that the complete up-to-date LIMWA lines are only available through the FEMA Flood Map Service Center as part of the National Flood Hazard Layer. They are not shown on MassGIS or other state viewers. And then landward of the MEWA is the X zone, and these areas are currently not located within the FEMA 1% chance floodplain. So learning from past storms. Areas along the coast of Massachusetts consist primarily of protected coastal reservations, natural wetland resource areas, and rural to highly urbanized development. And in each of these areas, regardless of its present landscape, they are subject to erosion, scour, and damage from storm events. Okay, sorry. So, FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Assessment Team, or MATS, has conducted engineering analysis after major storm disasters to assess damage to government facilities, homes, businesses, and other structures. And they determine the causes of structural failures and successes with the goal of learning exactly what happened and why, and how to reduce disaster damage in the future. What we can take away from this particular analysis assists in how we look at rebuilding efforts, new construction, and building code policies and regulations. So I'm going to refer back to this as I describe what we're seeing here. So in certain areas, the map found that flow channelization tends to be highly localized, and changes in elevation can facilitate flow channelization. So in this figure, and this is from Hurricane Sandy MAT report, they identified flow paths A, B, C, and D. So the flow channel A, this path here, resulted in washing this house into the bay. And then flow channels B through here, C, and D, resulted in undermining foundations and causing collapses of homes. The Hurricane Sandy map also found that buildings within 20 feet of erosion control structures exposed to ocean waves almost always sustained significant flood and/or erosion damage. Other evaluations include, but aren't limited to, this is the federal flood insurance claim map, for which we can see on the landscape areas of repetitive damage from storm events. So I guess for me, in closing, observations, again, including but not limited to those documented by FEMA, MassDEP, and through our Mass Coastal Storm team, who's been a little bit busy the last few weeks going out there and doing assessments, is reshaping really how we think about development and redevelopment within LSCSF. And we are hopeful that through these draft regulations, we can utilize what we have learned and adapt and change past practices within LSCSF and focus on utilizing this resource area and other wetland resource areas to our advantage by restoring and preserving their capacity to provide storm damage prevention and flood control. And now I'm going to pass it over to Pam Harvey.
Thanks so much, Jill. Yes, I'm going to begin with I'm going to provide a walking tour of the proposed regulations at a very brisk pace because we've got a lot to go through and we want to get to your questions. But I'm going to begin here with some sort of orientation to how the regulations work. We have many people living in land subject to coastal storm flowage, businesses, there's development already there. There's new development that may be proposed. So we tried to set up the regulations in a way that were going to be relatively easy to implement. So these are some considerations to think about when you're thinking about a project or how the regulations may apply to your site or within your town, because I know many of you may be with conservation commissions. So one key thing to begin with is whether or not the site is only in land subject to coastal storm flowages and also in another resource area. And we set up the regulations because, for the most part, that the the coastal resource areas are very tightly regulated, and in most instances would be more tightly regulated than for land subject to coastal storm flowage. So it's been set up for the general rule is that if you're in another resource area, you would use the performance standards for that resource area, with some important exceptions, and I will get to those in a minute. The second thing to consider is Jill walked you through what zone you're in within land subject to coastal storm flowage. So V zone, the moderate wave action, minimum wave action, and then use the FEMA maps to determine boundaries. The next thing is whether or not the project site is not developed yet or is previously developed, and the regulations are set up so that some provisions will apply to new development and some will apply to redevelopment. And then another factor, and these last two apply to any project in the coastal zone, whether or not the project's eligible for review as a limited project. And there we do have added some new limited projects for the coastal area, and I will get to those. And then finally about taking nature-based shoreline protection into account, and that applies to all coastal areas. So next slide.
Whoops, hang on.
Okay, all right. Beginning to this, turning to this central question of whether or not you're under the land subject to coastal storm flowage standards only, or whether or not there's another resource area, and how to sort that out. We're at 310 CMR at 10.36 in the proposed section 4 in the proposed regulations, in case any of you have started to read them and digest them. So again, the general rule is that if it overlaps another resource area, you meet those, except for these important provisions. And there's a provision about that addresses buildings, and there's no new buildings in the velocity zone, even on open piles. And then in the moderate wave action zone, new buildings would have to be elevated under the land subject to coastal storm flowage standards, dune, bank, or the building code, whichever is higher. So that's there's sort of a distinction there about buildings and building heights that would apply if you're in another resource area. There is and then for the moderate wave action, the building height would be base flood elevation plus additional 2 feet, and there is a limited waiver clause for the additional 2 feet for very exceptional circumstances, but in the most part that will apply. And I'll say parenthetically, the building code may be going higher up to 3 feet. That's a proposal; it's under discussion. But anyway, so stay tuned there. The second exception, this may be relatively limited, but there's a provision in the for coastal bank, a particular provision, and it's at 10.3070, and circumstances where the coastal bank doesn't supply sediment. And again, it's a very limited provision. And there, a project would have to meet both land subject coastal storm flowage and the coastal bank standard. Rocky intertidal shores, then they have to meet both those performance standards and land subject coastal storm flowage. And then finally, and not unimportantly, they do not apply to marine industrial uses, and that's a defined term. It's also a Chapter 91 term within designated port areas. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just turning to the kind of the basic standards themselves. They're set up in a way that's very consistent with the other coastal resource areas, and it applies in inland areas too, with the same kind of format. There's a preamble that you would expect that describes some of the functions of land subject to coastal storm flowage, that Jill's introduced you to those, the effects of development characteristics, and sets up the presumption of significance, the flood control and storm damage prevention. They're also determined to be per se significant within the velocity zone and the moderate wave action zone. Again, those are the areas of land subject to coastal flowage that are most affected by wave action and the velocity of waves coming in. As to definitions, we've added some that are new, that are new terms being introduced in the land subject to coastal storm flowage regulations. It's important also to look back to the general regulations at the beginning of the regulations at 10.04, and also the coastal regulations that have their own definitions at 10.23. So that's just, you may need to look at in more than one place to find definitions. Boundaries, these are at 10.363. For boundaries, they have, we're using the same, we're keeping with land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is the 1% annual chance that goes out to and can include historic evidence. But the boundaries of the zones, as Jill walked you through, is shown on the flood insurance rate map, are presumed to be accurate. And then there is an opportunity that FEMA offers to get an adjustment called a letter of map revision. So, but that's through FEMA, not through us. But if that's granted, that we would recognize that. And then there is an opportunity to rebut the presumption. And there's some language in the regulations about the modeling that you would use, which is similar to how the FEMA modeling works. So what's really important here is that the V zone and the line between the moderate wave action and the minimum wave action are shown on the mapping now. That was something that DEP and CZM requested that FEMA do, so they would be on our map. So that should be, much easier to implement than it would be if they were without them. So you won't be able to see that in the field. You need to be looking at the maps, and there'll be more guidance and help available on how to be able to find those boundaries. Minor activities, this is something that they're in a different section of the regulations. They're up there at 10.02 in the jurisdiction section, quite early in the regulations. We have some other activities that are minor activities that where applicants don't need to apply. And we did include some activities for the minimum wave action area only, and outside of other coastal resource areas where the activity can be conducted without needing to apply. And so plantings, zista pruning, small sheds, things like that. So if you're interested in that, what's in and what's out, caution that many coastal communities have bylaws and they may or may not recognize these. But anyway, so that's something that may be of interest to people who are living and working in the minimum wage action area. Next slide. Jill, next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. Okay, so now we're turning to the performance standards for new development. These are set up for the standard for the velocity zone and the moderate wave action zone is the same standard. It's no adverse effect. And there are some activities that are allowed, and actually it's the same list for both the velocities zone and the moderate wave action zone, including pedestrian walkways, some boating facilities, some work around coastal engineering structures. There's a provision to crosswalks to the Title V regulations about septic systems, so that there are some activities that can be conducted. In the velocity zone, there's no new buildings even on open piles. So in the moderate wave action zone, new buildings or buildings on undeveloped sites can be allowed as long as there's unobstructed flow beneath the building. The building has to be elevated, base flood above 2 and plus 2 feet. and then, and that limited waiver provision. But that's an important distinction between the velocity zone and the moderate wave action zone. There's some additional text for the moderate wave action zone about the building on piles being sited as landward as possible and minimizing other alterations. So we're trying to keep that area again as natural as possible and as permeable as possible to reduce adverse effects. Next slide. Okay, turning now to the minimum wave action area. Here that the standard is minimize adverse effects, and buildings can be new buildings can be allowed provided in either on open piles. Again, open piles means that there's unobstructed flow beneath, or in a solid foundation. There's wave energy. There is a provision that would allow the issuing authority when wave energy is significant and it's close to another resource area, within the buffer zone of another resource area, to require elevation. And then there's language in the regulations about trying to avoid alteration that would redirect or increase flooding on other properties. There's language about there's provisions for avoiding and minimize, trying to mitigate or avoid any increase in flood velocity or volume or elevation that would affect other properties, and also that would address situations where there's a confined area or basin where the flood flows, any water that went into them would be confined. So that would be obviously an adverse effect on other structures in that area. So and those topographic depressions would show up either on a topo map or through LiDAR. So that's again, that's to try to minimize effects on other properties, and also to avoid problems with impeding return flow. After a flood event, you do have return flow issues if you have confined areas. And requirements for stormwater management, and then being sure that the area stays as pervious as possible. Next slide. Okay, turning now to redevelopment. This provision has similarities to the redevelopment standards that we have for the riverfront area. Redevelopment is defined fairly generally as replacement, rehabilitation, or expansion of existing structures, the previously developed areas, sites that have structures, fill, pavement, vertical impediments to flow. So I think it should be, I think you probably will know these sites when you see them. And here the basic standard is to improve existing conditions by reducing pavement, trying to remove vertical restrictions in flows, flood storage as an example. Under these provisions, and stormwater management actually it will be required, and that's actually quite an important thing, because you can end up with a lot of water just coming in from the precipitation and storm events that gets added to the flooding, and you can end up with a lot of water. So stormwater management is very important, and there are different standards depending on whether or not the project is depending on what zone it is. So generally, we're in the context of redevelopment. We want it to be landward rather than seaward on the site, not to increase the building footprint. And then there's some provisions about the V zone, no new buildings, and damage reconstruction or substantial improvement, which are both building term required, also FEMA defined terms, would have to be on open piles with, again, flood flows beneath them. And then there's also some provisions about situations where there's damage to a foundation that would also require elevation. Again, these are provisions intended to try to get at some of the repetitive damage situations, and just to try to get things better than they are now in the context of already developed sites. Importantly, historic structures are exempt from the height requirements, so that's seemed important, because those have limitations on what they can do and meet their historic capacity. So, and then also there's some two provisions that apply, but they're within the redevelopment provisions that apply specifically to areas where the impervious surfaces have predominantly replaced floodplain functions. And one will allow placement of fill or berms for flood control in the minimum wave action area. And then there's also a provision that would allow elevation of existing seawalls or berm constructions in the V zone or the moderate wave action zone, and provided it's either conducted or supported by a public entity, and that it's important that there can't be any redirection of wave energy or floodwaters going to other properties. And partly the support of the public agency really is that it's very important with flood control, seawalls, and other sort of continuous flood control structures. It's a collective action problem, and you really need to have a continuous control. You can't just have ad hoc and projects where there are gaps between them, because then the flood control is just not going to work. So that is redevelopment. So I'm going to finish up with next slide. Oop, no, back slide. There we go. Okay, finishing up on land subject to coastal storm flowage. Here are two more provisions that are not unimportant. The first one is salt marsh and dune migration, and this one is sort of it's sort of a new thing for wetlands regulations, but it occurred to us that there may be opportunities where either salt marsh or dune, coastal dune, is adjacent to land subject coastal storm flowage, and there may be an opportunity to allow either one to migrate, either passive or assisted migration into land subject coastal storm flowage, and presumably likely if it's undeveloped, but in any case, it seemed like it was something we should encourage. So we have a provision in the regulations that would allow that to go forward. Again, it's sort of a new thing, but it seemed important to have that opportunity. And you may think, well, geez, if someone could have a yard and a swing set, why would they want a salt marsh in their backyard? And it's really going to be the case going forward that having salt marsh or coastal dune is not a bad thing to have, because they're going to be protecting your house and other inland or a building and other structures and inland areas. And then finally, closing out here, there's a provision about rare species protection, which is the same as in other resource areas. Okay, rare species habitat. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we're turning to some new provisions that affect all coastal resource areas. Beginning with this one, this is a general requirement establishing really as a foundational principle of the regulations that we really want to prioritize nature-based shoreline protection. And this provision is found in the general provisions for the coastal section at 10.24 1B. In case you're looking for it, that's where it's located. And I've quoted there the initial sentence of it that requires the applicant to consider, and the issuing authority may require, the restoration, enhancement, or creation of wetland resource areas through natural methods and materials and an alternative to coastal engineering structures. to promote resiliency along the shoreline. And we did really think this was important. If you can use a nature-based solution, that's really what you want to go for. Hardened structures are fixed on the landscape. In case any of you are wondering why we framed it this way, rather than just saying nature-based solutions or living shorelines, there are specific and many competing definitions of both those. So we just went with some, more general language here, but that's really what we're talking about. It's very important in thinking about this, that whatever plan what's being considered is based on the characteristics of the site to be sure that they're effective. You can't just put sort of any kind of nature-based solution at any site. So the regulations do have some specifics about characterizations of the site, including tidal range, bathymetry, intertidal slope, wave energy, and those actually we benefited from a paper that's done by some work done by the Northeast Regional Ocean Council in 2017 that cited some factors, and so that's what we looked to that, but it's very important again, because the site is your project's not going to be effective unless it's set up to match what's taking place at your site. We have a very varied coastline here in Massachusetts, so and then there's some other provisions in there about the ability to convert one resource area to another. There's some limits on that about not losing salt marsh, and also looking at the most current mapping for shoreline change. So you do want to be able to take the future into account in thinking about what kind of a nature-based solution might be appropriate. So, the bottom line here is that we really wanted to promote the adaptive capacity of resource areas to provide flood control and storm damage prevention and for shoreline property owners. Next slide. Okay, new limited projects. Okay, so we did recognize the need for some new limited projects. These ones that on this slide came up, I think, quite frequently from the municipal vulnerability planning that coastal communities have all done. One is about roads, and there was a revision of the existing limited project around roads to allow specifically to allow elevation, and there's some guardrails around it to protect other resource areas and be sure it's done in a way that won't restrict flow. But anyway, I think a lot of cities and towns will be interested in that one. And then we have a new limited project that goes to road and also transportation facility relocation and reconfiguration of water dependent use projects. And you can see the site is there. It's in the section of the coastal regulations that have the limited project. And so this goes to, again, moving a road, and also the water dependent use projects. We have a variety of those, including a lot of town beach projects, but also they're water dependent, many other water dependent businesses that may be able to take advantage of this provision. So have a look at that if you have water dependent projects in as clients or in your town or it's your business. So have a look at that. Okay, next slide. Okay, yes, and last but not least, we do have a provision, a pathway for research, scientific research on climate resilience, and it's more in the beginning of the regulations, 310 CMR 10.0512. It's located near the provisions for test projects for energy facilities, and it has some similarities there, but it's intended really for research that's looking specifically at the response of of wetlands to climate change. And it has some limitations on its use. We tried to set it up so that it's a sort of bona fide research and will have good, get some good information. There are limitations on the impacts and how long the project can go on, and the ability to do restoration. So if you're interested at all in scientific research projects, have a look at those, and we'll be interested in the comments from the scientific community on those. So next slide, and I'm turning it over to Lisa.
All right, thanks, Pam. We are running a little late, so I am going to jump into the questions in just a minute. We have 2 more information sessions after this one tonight at 6 p.m. and one on the 23rd at 1 p.m. And I encourage people to come to those if you still have questions after this session. And then the public hearings are shown there. There'll be 3 where we'll just be taking comment. Next slide. I'm going to leave the next slide up just to show you how to comment. And while that's up, we'll start with the questions that have been put in the chat, and we're going to try to get to as many of these as we can. So thank you all for loading up the chat with lots of good questions. The first one is,
Lisa,
please.
In a second.
Are there hands or?
Yeah, so I think what'll happen is because attendees, as opposed to panelists, are muted, we have an option for anybody who has who either raises their hand, which is if folks don't know how to raise your hand, if you look at the bottom of your screen along the bunch of icons in that toolbar, you'll see a button with a hand and it says raise hand. So if you click that, a little hand will go up beside your name and we'll see that you have your hand raised. And then we have the switches back here in the hosting room to allow you to verbally ask your question. Same thing with the questions that have been put in the Q&A. Rather than typing answers to all of these, some of them we have already answered in writing, but many of them are more suitable for like a Q&A type format. So I guess we can call on folks relatively in order, and we'll try to look for how some of them might be batched, or when we call on somebody, if you have asked multiple questions and you want to aggregate them, you can feel free to do that, but we'll aim to answer as many of them as we can live, as opposed to through typing an answer. There we go. So Jamie Medea has both the first written question in the Q&A and has her hand up. So I believe that what we'll do is click this button, and that will ask you to unmute yourself, Jamie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
There you go. All right.
So I did write out the questions, and I'm fine if someone just wants to read those and give the answer to everyone. Which do you prefer?
Okay, we can go through them, but should we go through all of
If you, as you
Jamie's?
wish, but please allow me to make one very major observation. Same thing I said last night for the Chapter 91. I'm frankly unable, even as a professional, to process all this information in this compressed timeline. There are not enough information sessions with enough time in between to understand and then turn into a comment. There are not enough opportunities for people to dialogue with people who've been working on this for 10 years. And I think you're doing yourselves a disservice by not providing more interactive time with people who are technologically capable of providing you with really important information. That is my number one comment. And the other is, I think it is outdated to rely so heavily on this concept of nature-based solutions when there's plenty of data about the viability and even preferability of technology-based solutions that are still advantageous for the environment. Thank you. Now I'll be quiet.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Jamie's first written question is, please repeat exactly what new construction would be prohibited. No option of using adaptive safe technology or materials to address climate change needs. Pam, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So I'm not sure what the new construction, the prohibition on new construction applies to new buildings in the velocity zone. So that's the area where during the wave height will exceed 3 feet above base flood elevation. So it's a pretty vulnerable area, and it's an area where even on piles, that you can see actually from some of the photos FEMA's taken that even on the piles there's scour and also the buildings tend to lose the vegetation that's around them, and so there's quite a bottoming out of the resource area beneath it. So that's the prohibition on new construction.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
what
Lisa, let's take like the next two from the Q&A, and then we'll go to 2 hands raised.
Okay. The next one is from Anonymous. What is the 100-year flood based on in the FEMA projections? Is this updated to be consistent with climate change?
Yes, and at the end, it is correct that that when FEMA does their modeling for the 1% annual chance, it is correct that it uses historic data. It does not project flooding into the future the way that the mapping that has been done, that DOT started using the flood risk model mapping that is done, that you get that information about what flooding will look like in 2030, 2050, 2070 and beyond. And that looks at that's projected data. We decided not to use those projections for these purposes at this time, although we're looking hard at them. At the time when we started this, I think they had not been done for the whole coast. And it's thinking through how you regulate people who are buildings or communities that are not within the floodplain now, but will be at some point in the future, is that's a lot to take on. So that will involve more discussion. But at this time we're using the FEMA mapping. The other thing that's important about the FEMA maps, of course, is that people are governed by those right now through the building code and by FEMA. So that's really the world that people live in, as far as the regulations that may apply to their building and what they can and cannot do.
Right, and I might add that the FEMA maps include the information needed to determine, which zone that your property might be in, like the V zone, the MOA or the MEWA.
Yeah.
The next question is for Pam. What is the thinking behind accepting marine industrial uses in a DPA?
Yeah, this is kind of a tricky one because there are designated port areas. I don't know, it's sort of easy to sort of forget this, but they are actually a resource area on their own. If you look at the coastal regulations there, along with coastal bank and coastal dune, there's designated port areas, and we looked at those, and it just seemed that for marine industrial uses, where it already has this provision about designated port areas, it didn't seem like it was really gonna work well to require additional elevation, that sort of thing, to these existing buildings within marine industrial areas.
Okay, thanks. And there are other allowable uses in the velocity zone that are listed in section 10.366 of the proposed regulations, including walkways, boat launches, docks, and other, a few other things listed in there.
Yeah.
There are also the existing limited projects that are listed in the Wetlands Protection Act regulations under section 10.24. Now we're going to a live question.
Yes, so we'll take two, first from Barry Fogel and then from Craig Wood. So Barry, it should be giving you the opportunity to, there you go.
Well, actually, my first question was in the Q&A. I was wondering if there were other minor activities that were considered for inclusion under 1002A3, but rejected. I'm curious what those were. And then what if the minimum wave action zone overlaps like the 100-foot buffer to the top of a coastal bank or something? Would this also apply? And my second question is actually more to actually echo what Jamie said. We've all been waiting many, many, many years for something to happen, and now you're trying to compress this process into only a month or two. And I agree with Jamie that more time should be allowed for people to process this and to comment. And my third question is, in that section that Pam referred to of 10.24, the language about issuing authorities may require natural options, that really translates to issuing authorities may impose that as a requirement. And I'm concerned about that one and wondering whether you're thinking of that in terms of actually being basically going to become a catch-all for imposing natural alternatives to coastal engineering structures.
Okay, so Barry got his money's worth on that. That's a three.
Yes,
So-
I can handle that. On the minor activities, we discussed that some time ago, so I don't have complete recall on what sort of got in and what ended up on the cutting room floor. But I think it is. I think we went around the block a bit on the size of the sheds that should be included, whether or not larger sheds should be included or not. On this one, I would really encourage people to submit comments on this about what they think should be in or out on the minor activities.
Yeah,
that would be really my suggestion. I kind of the thing that's, it's not completely different from other resource areas, but we have a lot of people living in lands open to coastal storm flowage in that moderate wave action. And we were concerned about activities that might sort of affect other people and their neighbors and, the shed washing over somebody else's property, that sort of thing, versus just letting people go and, live their lives and be able to do, convert their lawn to a vegetable garden, which seemed like a perfectly good thing. And you may think that, the list is too generous. You may think it's too narrow. And again, many towns have bylaws that may have things differently. On the question about the moderate wave action and if it goes over the top of the bank, for the most part, the bank regulations would apply, but as to the elevation of buildings, it would, the requirement would for building elevation would be applicable there. Yes, and on your comment about 10.24 and the issuing authority may require, I think it is true that as written, the issuing authority could require a nature-based project as opposed to a coastal engineering structure. It is written in that way. Again, it's a section of the regulations that is new, and I think that's a good one to comment on as well, if you think that's too open-ended or have a suggestion on how to frame that differently.
thank you.
We do want to encourage them, though. And again, it's really, I think when you think about sea level rise and you see the changes that are going to be happening along the shoreline in many places, hard structures have, they don't move well. The resource areas do tend to make their own adjustments with sea level rise.
Stephanie, is there another verbal comment?
Pam disappeared. So, and I just want to note that with 39 questions in the chat, we are unlikely to get through them all before we move to stormwater, but we will do the best we can.
Okay, the next question is, and I don't, Jill, you might be able to answer this one. Please address whether a project involving both pre-existing structures and some previously undeveloped areas will be reviewed as entirely previously developed or separated for analysis. Or Pam, feel free. Jill?
I was gonna say, could you repeat the question? It seemed
Please
a little
address
confusing.
whether a project involving both pre-existing structures and some previously undeveloped areas will be reviewed as entirely previously developed or separated for analysis.
I mean, to me, that would depend on the specific project and the work that's being proposed. Is it being proposed on existing? Is it being just proposed on the area that would be reviewed under redevelopment? So I don't know. I don't want to speculate on exactly the scenario that they're suggesting in that question.
But that would be a good
Sorry,
one to provide.
something to,
comment.
yes, if they could provide a scenario or in their comment, that would be helpful.
Great, thanks. The next one is also from Jamie. Please address why, it just popped away from it. Please address why DPA marine uses are exempt, but not other marine functions such as piers and docks for recreational marinas and boatyards, not in DPAs. And Jamie, there are additional allowable uses that are listed in 310 CMR 10.366 in allowable uses in B and MOA zone, including boat launches, open boat storage, and docks. So you can refer to that section, as well as limited, projects that are already in the Wetlands Protection Act. The next one, and Stephanie, let me know when you want an active person. Did I hear correctly? The regulatory area for LSCSF is based on the FEMA effective and preliminary maps, where there is not yet updated FEMA effective maps. Jill? The answer is yes. It's based on. Jill, did you want to? Yeah,
no, that's all right. Go ahead.
Preliminary maps. Yeah. Do new docks fall under prohibited structures in the velocity zone? Docks are included in the allowable uses section that I would refer you to 10.366, section 6 for allowable uses in the velocity and MOA zones. The next one is from Allie. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. Marie Rose. On slide 12 or 13, you stated that if LSCSF and another resource area that the performance standards for the other resource area apply, wouldn't be both resource standards?
So Lisa, look two down. Maria had an oops typo, so just look 2 questions down.
Oh, okay. If a project is located in both LSCSF and another resource area, which standards apply? The other resource area standards apply, except for there are exceptions to that, which are the elevation requirements that are described in section 10.364. So that's where there are exceptions to that rule. The rule that if you're in an LSCSF and another resource area, the other resource area standards apply, except for what's listed in 10.364. I hope that was clear enough. Let's see. Can you confirm about rebuttable to show more landward? That would mean a rebuttable is only accepted if it were to be more expansive than the FEMA boundaries. Are you asking whether the boundary could be rebuttable as to less than the FEMA mapping?
I think that's what the question is, and the answer is no. Yeah.
Or is it more? Because we've had situations where obviously we rely on FEMA, but then there are storms of record that we've utilized in the past, which may show that the floodplain is actually more expansive than what is shown. And in other situations, again, I think Pam referenced this in her slideshow, is that if you think it's less, you can always apply to FEMA for a letter of map revision, and they will change that location.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ally. Thank you. Yeah, that was what I was asking. I was curious if I've skimmed the regulations so far, but and had seen that, but was curious if it was sort of the expectation there was that the rebuttal would be in the case of a more expansive area, not and you would have to submit a letter of map revision for an area that was smaller, basically, than the FEMA boundaries.
Yes.
Yes.
Interesting question.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Pam is referring to buildings, but the language written is structures oftentimes. Where are piers and docks? I think we answered that one already. That there are allowable uses in the proposed standards that include docks. All right, Sam. The next one's from Shannon Palmer. For existing buildings in the velocity zone, would reconstruction be allowed in the same footprint?
Yeah, and the answer is yes, it could be, but it would have to be elevated.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sam Butcher, do I understand correctly that if a location is subject to LSCSF and is also another resource area, Barrier Beach, for example, that LSCSF does not apply and that only Barrier Beach regulations would guide decisions? That's correct, Sam, except for, the exceptions that are provided in section 10.364, which require the elevation, like if you're in a, velocity zone in redevelopment, or if you're in a MOA zone. And there are a couple other exceptions in that section as well. Erica Larner, no new buildings. Will the agricultural exemption apply to that standard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is exemption under the act, it would apply, yeah.
Yeah. Danielle Kent, regarding stormwater management on redevelopment projects in LSCSF, I'm assuming that residential properties are exempt from DEP stormwater standards. Single family houses would be exempt. Basically, the activities would follow the stormwater standards. So the single family houses would be exempt from that. Anonymous, why is redevelopment being allowed in the V zone, especially in areas that have historic damage from flooding?
Pam? Yeah, we actually we've gotten a similar comment. The thing with redevelopment is that the building is already there, and for the V zone, we do have a provision that would allow redevelopment of a reconstruction of a building in the velocity zone, but there is a provision that would limit that to buildings that have gotten an occupancy permit before the effective date of the regulations, and that's we're trying there to cut back on repetitive losses from development in the velocity zone. And I would encourage you to answer, comment on this. I think Stephanie has a comment as well.
No, I was
okay.
just listening. Nope.
Okay, the next question's rather long, but I'll try to, for re and new development standards, are they based on like the riverfront standards for the definitions for new and redevelopment? Will there be set dates on defining redevelopment and when structures were established? The MEWA zones are normally map zone A with no base flood elevation. Pertaining to new development, how are we supposed to know what the proposed structure should be 1 foot above pile height or foundation height? This leads to the question on how do we know a structure is in compliance with the proposed standard with no defined BFE?
Okay, I can probably help with some of this. Some of the dates for the redevelopment standards in the riverfront area came from the riverfront statutory amendment. So we don't have, those dates don't apply with Atlantic coastal storm flowage redevelopment. And then the comment about the MIWA zones and the base flood elevation, I think there often is a base flood elevation. I'm not sure about this, but they the buildings, I mean, the base flood elevation is something that has to be known for purposes of building code and FEMA. I mean, that is a known elevation.
Pam,
So, yeah.
this is
Oh,
Rebecca.
Rebecca, help,
For
yes.
coastal flood zones do have BFEs established. There are inland A zones that do not, but coastal ones do.
Okay,
Thank you, Rebecca. And just for everyone's information, Rebecca Haney from Mass Office of Coastal Zone Management is here to help us with questions such as that one. Thanks, Rebecca. Question from Daniel Kent. Will LSCSF carry a 100-foot buffer zone of jurisdiction? And the answer is no.
No.
There is no buffer zone to LSCSF. Zach Basinski, when elevating a structure, new building stairs, new bullied stairs,
I think it's
building
stairs
Yes.
will be required in order to access the building. Will these stairs be allowed to be excluded from the proposed building footprint? Also, elevating the structure will also require elevating exterior utilities onto new platforms. Is it safe to assume that platforms won't count as structures increase?
If it bleeds more into building code, or if that's
Yeah. I mean, I think so this is for the purposes of the redevelopment standards about whether or not we would say it increased the footprint. I don't know. With new regulations, sometimes it's hard to ask for, to answer something that comes up for the first time without sort of thinking through how we want to apply it more generally. So
right,
this
would be a good one to submit, in your comment, in your written comments. Zach, thank you for that. Erica Larner, will BLSF have any similar added standards? We will very briefly touch on one minor change to BLSF in the stormwater section, which is a good segue. Stephanie, how long will we go on these questions before we go into?
I think that we have to pivot, otherwise we won't have time to preview the stormwater proposed changes with folks.
Right.
So
maybe 3 more minutes to 2:15 and we'll pivot.
Sure.
Okay, Julie Eaton Ernst, can you explain more on the intent of 1036-8D and requirements for mitigation with potential construction of coastal barriers? Example, levee or berm. Is that the Pam? Is that the one with the where the
that was the provision for berms in the minimum flood area, and there I think we knew from learned experience and our sense of where what the flood issues were around the Commonwealth, that there was going to be need for berms, construction of berms in the minimum wave action area, and so we wanted to specifically allow them. That's really what we were trying to do, to say that was something you could do, and it's a method of flood control that can work in instances where you're really you're probably going to need to do something because of sea level rise, where important facilities are going to you're going to have to keep flooding away from from moving further inland.
Great. Thanks, Pam. Please, next question, Andrea Langhauser, please clarify when firm maps are used in the regulations and when projected sea level mapping are used. And hi, Andrea, we're not using projected, we're using only the firm maps in these LSCSF.
Yes, for purpose of jurisdiction, we do refer people to the, what's going to happen in the future and thinking about using nature-based solutions through for shoreline protection. But generally, we're sticking to the FEMA maps for now.
Okay, the next Rinky Black. What are the topics for this evening and next week's sessions? We will be going through the same presentation and taking just more questions. So that is what we plan to do in the next 2 info sessions. So if your question doesn't get answered today, please feel free to come to those and put your questions in early. And Herbst, does no obstruction to flow prohibit all types of screening or breakaway enclosures?
Yeah, the language we have in the regulations is a free, unobstructed flow. So we probably need to, we'll probably need to, it would be great to get some comments on this because I know people do want to do some things under their house, so.
Right. Okay, so I think we're going to have to pivot, unfortunately. Thank you all for these fabulous questions. And, we appreciate all of them. We'll be looking at them and sorting through them, following this info session. If we have time tonight, and I encourage you, if you aren't, having dinner at 6 o'clock or 6:30 when the questions start tonight, it is a smaller group so far than this one. So, okay, so pivoting to stormwater, we have another, important section of updates in the proposed standards, and that is for stormwater. I want to introduce our team that will be presenting today along with me, which is Tom McGuire, MassDEP, Elizabeth Clark, also MassDEP, and Dave Roman, our special guest from Comprehensive Environmental Inc., who helped us to draft the revised stormwater handbook, which is online, available for folks to look at and comment on as well. Next slide, Dave. This overview, and we'll try to go through it quickly so we can get to your questions on this. We plan to do a high-level overview of standards 2, 3, and 4 for stormwater, which are the main standards that are changing. Then we do a little bit of a deeper dive, and also standard 7, which is redevelopment. We'll do a deeper dive on those same standards. And then we will give you an overview of the proposed new standard, standard 11 for stormwater. Then we will provide an overview of some new environmentally sensitive site design credits that have been developed. A preview of the updated stormwater handbook, and then finally we'll do a Q&A section just like this one. Next slide, Dave. So the main goals of the stormwater updates were first and foremost to update outdated precipitation data that our current stormwater standards rely on for design, primarily of peak rate attenuation. To update that with current data due to increasing storms. We are also proposing these updates to better align with the EPA MS4 general permit to the extent possible, to promote nature-based, environmentally sensitive site design, and also, to update our stormwater handbook, which is at this point about 15 years old and in bad need of an update. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you there are 10 stormwater standards currently, and we are proposing, the main changes are to standards 2, 3, 4, and 7, which are peak rate attenuation, recharge, pollutant removal, and redevelopment. And then we're proposing to add a new standard pertaining to total max zone daily loads. Next slide. Starting with just a high level overview of standards 2, 3, and 4 as they pertain to both new development and redevelopment, which is standard 7. Starting with standard 2, the standard 2 is for peak runoff attenuation, and it requires that stormwater management systems be designed so that post-development peak discharge rates do not exceed pre-development peak discharge rates. And that standard is not going to change. However, the precipitation data that the standard relies on, we're proposing to discontinue use of the current 60-year-old technical paper 40 data that current designs are being based on, and adopt the new NOAA 14 precipitation atlas for use in stormwater design in the standard for new development and for redevelopment. Except rather than use the average or fitted value of the NOAA 14 atlas, we are proposing that designs would be based on the 90% of the published upper confidence interval to reflect currently observed extreme storms. So we are also proposing to continue requirement of the 2 and 10 year storm for design, and also for the 100-year storm for design. For redevelopment, the current standard is maximum extent practicable, and we are proposing that the proposed standard would continue to be maximum extent practicable, except it would be based on the NOAA, the higher end of the NOAA standard, which we refer to as NOAA plus. So it would be NOAA plus to the maximum extent practicable for redevelopment. Next slide. For standard 3 pertains to recharge, and it requires that systems be designed so that post-development peak discharge, so that post-development recharge reflects pre-development recharge. And the current standard is based on soil types. So we have different standards based on whether your soil is A, B, C, or D. The proposed standard would change that and require 1 inch of recharge for A, B, and C soils if you're using the static method, and D soils would be a maximum extent practicable standard even for new development. We are also allowing that additional methods be allowed for designing that, including the dynamic method and the continuous simulation method, which would be presumed to meet the 1 inch standard. Additionally, we conducted a reevaluation of this standard as was requested by our advisory committee, and we'll be discussing that in a little detail within a few minutes. For redevelopment, the recharge standard is currently maximum extent practicable, and that would remain as maximum extent practicable, except for it would be maximum extent practicable of 1 inch. And we are also proposing to allow off-site mitigation for redevelopment. Next slide. The next slide is standard 4, which is the pollutant removal standard. And this standard currently requires removal of 80% of the average annual load of total suspended solids. And this was the most important standard to try to align with the EPA MS4 general permit. And so our proposal is to require removal of 90% total suspended solids and 60% total phosphorus for new development, similar to EPA, only we are proposing not to allow off-site mitigation because new development would be on new sites and could be designed appropriately to meet this. For redevelopment, we're also proposing to align that with EPA in requiring 80% total suspended solids removal and 50% total phosphorus removal. Only that the proposal is for redevelopment to meet this standard rather than to meet it to the maximum extent practicable. We do have exceptions to this requirement, and we've added a few additional exceptions to this requirement, exceptions that would either not require stormwater standards like single family houses or other types of projects that would remain maximum extent practicable, but most projects would be expected to fully meet this standard, and we will discuss the reasons for that in a couple minutes. We're also proposing to allow off-site mitigation for redevelopment. Next slide. I think we will now move on to a slightly deeper dive on standards 2, 3, 4, and 7 now. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom McGuire from MassDEP's Climate Resilience Coordinator and longtime stormwater guru. Tom?
Thanks, Lisa. As Lisa indicated before, we're currently relying on technical paper 40, which was published in 1961. So it's over 60 years old. It's basically a paper map with like 2 or 3 isoheights or, lines of equal precipitation that go through Massachusetts. So it's very coarse. We're proposing to replace it with NOAA 14, which is a web-based interface. You can get precipitation statistics for any point in the state. We're proposing to use an additional increment above that, which we refer to as NOAA Plus, which is based on the range of variability we see in actual storms. Next slide, please. So this shows you how you would get NOAA Plus. When you point and click on any spot in Massachusetts, it generates this table. So the black bolded value is the fitted value, and then underneath in parentheses is the lower confidence to the upper confidence. So we're proposing that parties use the upper confidence interval times 0.9, which reduces that value by 10%. And that's the value you would use for design. So this reflects the range of variability we're actually seeing in storms. Next slide, please. We're also proposing to make the same change to BLSF. Right now, in the absence of FEMA data, it's the largest event observed or recorded in the event of a conflict in engineering analysis using a 7-inch storm in 24 hours. In a lot of cases in Massachusetts now, the 100-year storm is like 8 to 9 inches. So we would use NOAA Plus for consistency with stormwater. And then I hand it over to Dave Roman.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So now moving on to standard 3, which is focused on recharge. So the current standards are based, the recharge depths are based on the hydrologic soil group. So for example, for the static method for group A, the recharge depth is 0.6 inches. For soil group D, it's 0.1 inches. The proposed standard is for the recharge depth to be 1 inch for all soil types except for D. And there are a couple of ways to lower this amount using the dynamic methods. So dynamic sizing, can essentially result in smaller SCMs or stormwater control measures than static sizing because it considers the saturated hydraulic conductivity. So there's a couple of different methods already available in the handbook. That's the simple dynamic and the dynamic field method. The proposed handbook has a new dynamic method called the continuous simulation method. And this method looks at long-term rainfall records near the site to come up with a dynamic sizing. One thing to note is MassDEP did look at this 1 inch target based on some comments from the advisory committee. So there were a couple of analyses that were done. One was a base flow separation analysis, and one was a continuous rainfall simulation analysis. So kind of two separate methods to try to look at this. And really the whole goal of recharge is to approximate redevelopment conditions. So based on the results of this analysis, DEP is considering to change that recommendation for the static recharge depth from 1 inch to 0.8 inches. So there is a request for comments for this in the notice to reviewers document. So MassDEP is welcoming comments on this. And the link is right down here at the bottom of the slide. And I will hand it over to Liz to talk about Standard 4.
Hi, I am Liz Clark. I'm going to run through the changes of Standard 4 with you, as well as the new Standard 11. Standard 4 was updated with two main goals in mind. Stormwater runoff is a significant source of pollution to the waters of the Commonwealth, and in the past 4 to 5 years, we've seen 224 new water bodies be designated as impaired related to pollutants that are typically found in stormwater runoff. So the standard has been elevated to increase the level of water quality coming off of our new and redeveloped sites. Additionally, about 74% of the towns and municipalities in the Commonwealth are subject to the MS4 permit, which have a higher level of post-construction stormwater management requirements. So the goal was to align to the extent possible with the 2016 MS4 permit. Next slide. So what has changed? The current standard is based upon total suspended solids removal, getting rid of your particulates, your floatables in your stormwater. So requiring 80% average TSS removal on your new projects, and then 80% TSS removal to the maximum extent practical on your redevelopment projects. The standard is moving to increase the TSS removal requirements for new projects to 90%. And in addition, we're now considering nutrient removal as well. So 60% total annual phosphorus removal is required on new projects. And for redevelopments, it is going to 50% total phosphorus removal. With redevelopment projects, the standard previously was maximum extent practicable. We are moving to a fully meets for redevelopment. In the event that you cannot meet these standards on site, there is the option to consider off-site mitigation if you're not a LUPL or discharging to a critical area. You'd have to first submit an alternatives analysis demonstrating the hardships that don't allow you to meet the treatment on site, and then you can start evaluating your off-site options and starting close to your site and moving out, looking, maybe on the same project site or within the same project locus to begin with, then stepping back and evaluating the same wetland system, then potentially an adjacent site, the same municipality, and then looking at the same HUC 12 or Hydrologic Unit 12 subwatershed. And those watersheds are available on MassMapper if you'd like to see them. Next slide. There are still the exemptions to meeting the redevelopment standards, and these align very much with what's in the 2008 Stormwater Handbook. So projects that aren't subject to the standards still include single-family houses, single-family developments of 4 or less units or lots that do not discharge to critical areas, emergency repairs, and we've added gardens with no impervious area. Projects that still can remain in that maximum extent practicable category are single-family developments of 4 or less units or lots that discharge to a critical area, single-family developments of 5 to 9 units or lots that do not discharge to a critical area, unpaved paths, multi-use paths, bike paths, anything that's not subject to regular vehicular traffic, marinas, boatyards, and roadway maintenance. Next slide. So there's 3 options listed in the handbook to calculate the pollutant removal credits and how you comply. On table 2-2, there is a stormwater control crosswalk, and this is going to tell you your methodology on how you're looking at this. So starting with option 1, all projects are required to evaluate and implement environmental sensitive site design credits, and we'll go over that in just a few minutes. If you cannot use the ESSD credits, you do have to submit an alternatives analysis demonstrating why you cannot. And then you can move into these other sizing methods, which is the EPA performance curves, which have now been added into Appendix B of the Stormwater Handbook. These are the curves that were included in Appendix F of the MS4 permit. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with them, and they can help you size your stormwater control measures so that you're meeting the targets of the 90% total suspended solids removal and the 60% phosphorus load reductions. And if there isn't a performance curve, you'll be defaulting back to the MassDEP pollutant removal rates, such as getting 25% TSS removal for a catch basin. Next slide. So this is an example of the EPA performance curves. The dark blue line here is our total suspended solids removal. The darker orange line is the total phosphorus removal. On our vertical axis, you have your load reductions that you can achieve. And then on the horizontal, that is the runoff depth times the impervious area that's tributary to the stormwater control method. So you can look at sizing in 2 different ways here. So the first that we have in these blue lines show just sizing to meet the pollutant removal targets, the 90% total suspended solids and the 60% total phosphorus. And you can see to meet both of those targets, it required a treatment depth of 0.4 inches times the contributory impervious area. And you can also evaluate for meeting that 1-inch recharge depth, and if you are a LEPL or critical area water quality depth that's required. So that getting that 1 inch in this BMP would significantly increase your rates to getting about a 90% total phosphorus removal and almost 100% TSS removal. These charts are very handy also for helping you identify kind of your efficient points on your BMPs when you're, or SEMs, sorry, when you are really hitting your maximum pollutant removals and at what depth. Next slide. So pivoting to the new standard 11, compliance with TMDLs. The standard is also designed and developed to help protect and enhance the waters of the Commonwealth. And it's applicable to projects that discharge to or within watersheds of TMDLs that are related to nutrients, so your phosphorus and your nitrogen, for your metals, which would include your zinc, cadmium, lead, aluminum, and iron. It does not apply to the Mercury North Coastal TMDL, and also your fecal indicator bacteria's fecal coliform, E. coli, pathogens. To comply with this standard, you're going to meet standards 3 and 4, as well as develop a long-term pollution prevention plan that is applicable to your pollutant of concern, such as if you have nutrients, you're going to develop a nutrient management plan. And then you're also going to select stormwater control measures that are targeted for your pollutant of concern. So there is new tables in the handbook to help you with that. Next slide. Just to see if you need to comply with standard 11, MassDEP has developed a TMDL viewer. The link is on this slide here, and these are going to be available. Also, the Mass Mapper includes this information as well. Next slide. And here is table 2-6. This is the listing of the stormwater control measures. At the top here, we have the pollutants of concern, TSS, total nitrogen, total phosphorus, fecal indicator bacteria, and metals. And then each SCM is labeled to see if it can be used for that pollutant. Okay, and I think I'll be passing it over to Dave.
Okay, thanks, Liz. So as Lisa mentioned, the proposed handbook has a couple of new environmentally sensitive site design credits. And that's because there is a new requirement in there that environmentally sensitive site design and LID techniques must be used to attenuate stormwater pollutants. So one example of that is to use SCMs to meet the recharge standard and the pollutant removal standards. So to help applicants meet this requirement, the ESSD credits were updated and added. So in the 2008 handbook, these are referred to as the LID credits. So it's just a renaming. So now it's just the ESSD credits. So the 2008 handbook had 3 of these credits. The criteria of those was updated to make them a bit more attainable to use. There are 4 new ESSD credits, and there's also an expanded list of MassDEP recognized ESSD and LID techniques to meet this requirement. So looking at this table here, this is listing all 7 of the credits. So the first credit was in the 2008 handbook, and this is really just for general ESSD to encourage minimization of impervious surfaces. There's a new credit for solar projects. Credits 3 and 4 were also in the 2008 handbook, and this is really about disconnection of impervious surface to a qualifying pervious area, such as like a meadow area. There's a new credit that encourages use of tree canopies, and the whole idea here is that you can reduce the effective impervious cover that must be treated to meet standards 3 and 4. So the idea here would be to, essentially account for the amount of canopy that overhangs onto impervious surface. And there is some information in there about using new trees versus existing mature trees. Credit 6 is for redevelopment projects. So that's encouraging reduction of impervious area. And then there's a new credit for buffer areas. So essentially encouraging sheet flow from certain impervious areas into buffers. This can be existing buffers or new buffers. So now we'll go through a quick overview of the draft handbook. So this table here is just showing a comparison of the structure from the 2008 handbook to the revised handbook. So the 2008 handbook was set up to be 3 separate volumes. The revised handbook is just one document. So it follows the same general flow as the 2008 handbook. It's just now everything is in chapters, and there are appendices at the end. So for example, the 2008 handbook has the BMP fact sheets in volume 2. Now all that stuff is just at the very end, and they're now called stormwater control measures. So the handbook has been updated, a couple of just key formatting changes. It has a new cover page, table of contents, searchable headings, live links to kind of help users get to the information quickly. Tried to add in pop-up boxes for things that are important, such as the change in nomenclature from BMP to SCM or stormwater control measure. There are standardized calculation boxes to give examples of how to do various calcs in the handbook, summary tables to kind of help make the information easy to find. Everything's been reformatted, so the old BMP specifications have kind of had an overhaul. So the content in the handbook has been updated largely to coincide with the proposed regulation updates. So, for instance, there's new guidance on how to obtain precipitation depth and distributions for NOAA Atlas 14. There's information on how to use the pollutant removal curves, new ESSD fact sheets and credits. As Liz mentioned, there's a new TMDL standard, standard 11. And then just a couple other things that have been mentioned today. More information on the alternatives analysis framework. There is information on how redevelopment projects can use offsite mitigation. Just more information on content to include in some of the required plans. So the construction plan, the long-term pollution plan, and the O&M plan. Some other miscellaneous things. There's a new setback table. So as opposed to kind of having setbacks scattered all over the handbook, it's all in one place. There's a chapter on solar projects and a chapter on highway considerations. And I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Thanks, Dave, and the rest of the team. This is our schedule is that, as you know, we have 2 more info sessions. One is tonight at 6 and one is on the 23rd at 1. We encourage you to come to those if you continue to have questions. And then we have a series of hearings where we take comment on January 31st and February 1st. Next slide. And we're going to leave this up for you to look at. It just explains how you can submit your comments. And we'll start with the questions and try to get through as many questions as we possibly can. Stephanie, are there hands raised, or should we launch into the...
Raised hands, so we can go right into the Q&A, and so far there's only a merciful 10. So
okay. All right, so the first one is from Anonymous, and it is for recharge standard 3. Would you allow continuous simulation results such as those calculated for the EPA Region 1 Taunton study? And we are allowing continuous simulation as a method to calculate recharge. That is in the standard 3 proposed. I don't know, I'm not familiar with the EPA Region 1 Taunton study, but for, Dave or Tom, I don't know if you are, but we are allowing continuous simulation as one method for the recharge standard.
Yeah, so what's in the handbook is a bit of a different method than that. So so it's different.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dave. Good. From Jamie Medea, how is the copper addressed in the stormwater discharge removal standards? And I'm gonna look at Liz. Is that part of the metals TMDL copper? Do you know?
It is not.
Okay.
So the TMDLs are limited to the zinc, cadmium, lead. It does not include copper. Where's the...
No, I think that the TMDL
aluminum, iron. Yeah.
Yeah, the metals standard, the metals TMDL is one of the ones that's required in standard 11, but copper is not one of those, Jamie, that's required to be addressed in the stormwater standards. Angela Pantationi, can you please explain the definition of near and how DEP intends comes to use their discretion in applying the term to critical areas that are now required to be set back 100 feet anyway? For example, the town of Ware has a CFR running through its downtown urbanized area. If someone redevelops there, there's no way to meet the standard 4 without offsite mitigation. So I don't know, Tom, if you want to answer that one, but there is a definition of near, a new definition of near in the proposed standards. Tom, do you want to say anything else about the
Yeah, well, the other thing we're proposing to do is to establish setbacks. Right now, we don't have a setback to critical areas other than the 50 feet from a BMP to a critical area, the same as any other wetland. So one of the things we're proposing to do is to have setbacks for like discharge points. So take a look at those setbacks. We'd welcome comment on them. We're planning to adjust them to try to make them more consistent with our current practices, which are mostly for recharge.
Right, so that's something you can, maybe provide a comment on, Angela. Anonymous, has an independent peer review of the NOAA Plus methodology been completed? So the NOAA methodology was extensively peer reviewed. The NOAA Plus proposal has been there's a technical evaluation on the website that's been prepared that explains the thinking behind the adoption of NOAA Plus. And so I refer you to that. It'll give you some background on how we arrived at that, and also some of the independent evaluations that were done on it. Erica.
Can I just add, Lisa, to that? So we have another group in Massachusetts called the Massachusetts Resilient Massachusetts Action Team. So they've done projections for the year 2030, 2050, 2070, and 2090 for future extreme precipitation. So NOAA Plus is akin to the 2030 projected value.
Right, so the future predictions are higher, than NOAA Plus in general, as a general rule. Erica Larner, BLSF is updated in the Stormwater Handbook. Will Wetlands Protection Act regs also require that the NOAA Plus record of the largest storm be used in determining where the BLSF is? And the answer is no. No, the FEMA maps will be continued to be used for BLSF, except in the event of a conflict. That's where NOAA Plus would come in.
Yeah, we're proposing to keep the rule the same way it is now. So it's FEMA map. In the absence of FEMA, largest event observed or recorded, and then in the event of a conflict, the engineering analysis, but using NOAA Plus instead of the 7-inch storm in 24 hours.
Okay, Jamie, thank you for continuing to feed us great questions. Can the new stormwater standards limit off-site runoff of fertilizer and pesticides from homes, not just business sites?
Well, there's going to be a phosphorus reduction requirement.
I can jump in here. So the long-term pollution prevention plan does require that the storage and application rate of fertilizers needs to be addressed there. So source control is in the stormwater handbook, but when you talk about homeowners, you also have to keep in mind the jurisdiction where under 4 lots or units of single family homes, the standards do not apply. And then if they do not discharge to a critical area, and then there's also that maximum extent practical. So it's in there, but it's going to depend on the size of the development, I would think.
Thank you, Liz, for that. Anonymous, standard 4, how will performance be quantified? Not quite sure. Does anyone?
Well, maybe that's the credits. So maybe Dave should speak to that.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that you can meet the 90% TSS and 60% phosphorus. So you can, meet that either using the ESSG credits, the performance curves that we went over, and then if there is a practice that doesn't have a curve, there are some DEP specific credits for those. So there's a table in the handbook that's probably the most helpful in it is table, I believe, 2.4 in section 2.2, section 2-2, which kind of explains how you can calculate those.
There's also a table in the regulations that explains the credit for different types of SCMs. And that kind of goes to the next question as well, which is also from Anonymous. Will roofs be considered as phosphorus-free or reduced phosphorus contributing surface?
It's a good question. Right now, in compliance with the MS4 permit, phosphorus loading is applied uniformly to the land use, and there is no exemption for the roof runoff.
Thank you. Okay, another anonymous. Has MassDEP done a regulatory impact analysis on what the cost of compliance will be with the new stormwater standards? And if so, where can that analysis be found? So on the website, we just posted a scenario analysis that we had done last year. I believe it's up. And if it's not up yet, it's about to be up. And it's in the area of where the regs are posted and some of the other materials are posted, you know, for review, where the Stormwater Handbook is posted. So there is a scenario analysis there, and there's the original scenario analysis was done for one of the advisory committee meetings, and that was updated in the scenario analysis that's now posted in the area where the regs were posted. So if it's not up today, it'll be up like in the next day or two. Allison Manigan, sorry if I butcher your name. I'm concerned about the increased gray area that is created by increased reliance on MEP or allowing off-site mitigation. It seems this will increasingly put commissioners in a decision-making position between arguing engineers. Any thought on this, on how commissioners can be ready for this?
Yeah. You want me to jump in here? I was
Yeah,
going to
sure.
say, I think it's going to be something that does develop as it gets put into use. There are other places in the country, Washington, D.C., I think Michigan, that are utilizing offsite mitigation for stormwater peak attenuation. So I think it's going to evolve on how we're able to implement the offsite mitigation. It may have to be kind of a collaborative type solution where we have multiple municipalities working together to figure that out.
Right. But the other thing is, just to add one more thing, is that the offsite mitigation is primarily allowed for redevelopment for standard 4 pollutant removal. And that's because of the shift from an MEP standard to a fully meet standard for most projects, not all. And because we were allowing offsite development or offsite mitigation for standard 4, and a lot of times recharge and the pollutant removal standards are designed together, we are also allowing it for standard 3. So that's really why we are allowing the offsite for standard 3 and 4 for redevelopment. Erica Larner, are solar panels going to be considered impervious, or will there be spacing and slope requirements to be considered impervious? Previously, commissions were given guidance that they were considered pervious during the first round of the SMART program. We do have a new credit for solar, for solar panel, solar arrays. And so if that credit, the requirements are met, the credits will be allowed. I don't know, Dave, do you want to add anything on the, on whether the panels are considered impervious or pervious, or Tom?
They are considered impervious. There is, and the solar information in the handbook is based on the solar policy, which I think is 17-1. So that's what all the information is based on.
Okay, Dave's talking about the existing MassDEP solar policy, which is online right now on MassDEP's website. Wendy Tram, I saw there was a section that said no SEMs to be constructed inside or under buildings? Would there be exceptions if space is limited? Tom? Tom?
We're not proposing any exceptions to put them in a building basement or under a building, no. I mean, you know, the way these things work is they store water. So introducing water to the building envelope is dangerous for structural failure of the building. I mean, you know, you could go to, Leominster, Mass with the August, 2023 floods, where there was a highway culvert that was running near a building and the whole building foundation failed. It's just very dangerous.
Okay, so, right, so there are no exceptions for that. Brad Johnson, will the handbook provide a gradation requirement for sizing hydrodynamic separators to comply with TSS removal equipment? I'm gonna ask Dave about that. Dave, do you have an answer to that one? Oh.
Their gradation requirement.
For sizing hydrodynamic separators to comply with TSS removal requirements.
I think they're asking about a particle size distribution. So we're not proposing a particle size distribution.
Okay, thanks,
That's
Tom.
what they're asking about.
I'm not sure if Brad is here, but if that's not your question, Brad, let us know. Chris Naylor, will the dynamic methods allow infiltration rates to be based on Rawls table soil types? This is a Dave or Tom question. Will the dynamic methods allow infiltration rates to be based on Rawls table soil types?
The answer is no. And Rawls himself changed those rates in the subsequent research. So we're really relying on the NRCS rates that they use for classifying the soils and hydrologic groups. And then the parties, as they do now, have to go out and do tests of saturated hydraulic conductivity. And those are the rates that should be used for design. The actual saturated hydraulic conductivity tests that are done on the site with a factor of safety built in. Because what happens over time is we see some long-term clogging of some of these soils.
Okay, we have about 10 more questions and it's 3 o'clock. So Stephanie, are you still there? Or should we go do people want to go a few minutes longer or
I think if there's 10 questions, we can get to them.
we can try to go through them real quick. Maybe we'll go 10 more minutes and then that'll be it. Will MassDEP include a list of all questions with the presentation recording, including the questions that were not able to be answered? I'm not sure about that. So we'll try to do that if we can. Jamie asked, not a question, FYI, not regulating copper discharges in stormwater TMDL means stormwater reaches coastal areas full of copper, and then DEP and CZM seek reduction of copper to below drinking water standards from any stormwater discharger at the coast. Impossible to meet. Okay, thank you for that, Jamie. We'll take that under advisement. The next question is for Anonymous. For exceptions where the standards do not apply, are there any credits or incentives to decrease stormwater pollution runoff? It's good. I suggest you put that question in your written comments. Thank you. Right now there aren't incentives for that. Okay, Jamie. Jamie Medea, thank you, Liz. Yes, and less than 4 units is where most fertilizer and pesticide is coming from and ruining our waterways and wetlands. Thank you for bringing that point up throughout this session. Angela Hannah Chioni, your setback to CFR is 100 feet, not 50, and the temperature of the discharge needs to be 68 degrees. How is this expected to be enforced? Tom, do you want to?
Well, so the way we propose the setbacks, they apply to the outlet point. So if we think about the way most of the setbacks right now don't even apply to like extended detention basins, except in limited cases, like a property line. So the what we're proposing now with the setback would apply to the discharge point, would move it much further back. But it's still an issue. Right now it's a case by case, because there's no discharges allowed to or near. But we're proposing a numerical standard to kind of replace that.
Thanks, Tom. James Hooley, was there any consideration for linking rules to the SNEP retrofit manual that likely will govern much of the TMDL compliance implementation? No, there wasn't, but the new standard 11 is primarily intended to try to focus the SCMs that are used based on, certain TMDLs. If you're discharging to a certain TMDL, one of the 5 that are included in the proposed standards.
But can I just jump in really quickly? I know we're limited on time. Is right now redevelopment includes retrofit projects. So one of the things we're proposing is to break out retrofits as a separate class of projects to encourage retrofits of existing development instead of the more onerous 80-50 rule for redevelopment.
Oh, okay, that's a good point, Tom. Thanks. From Anonymous, what is the justification for not reducing the threshold for exemptions from the stormwater standards? Allowing single-family developments of 4 lots seems illogical based on the goal of the proposed changes. Well, the 4 lots is already in the standards, so there is already an exception in the stormwater standards for the 4 lots, and so we did not eliminate any of the existing exceptions. We are, however, trying as a general overall goal to tighten the standard for pollutant removal for most projects. Jamie, not a question. Properly designed water storage under buildings is not dangerous. Okay, thank you for that comment, Jamie. Bridget Graziano, offsite mitigation. How does this work for issuance of orders of conditions with other towns, if allowed in the other municipalities? And would it be allowed to have different owners of parcels? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would think it would be a strict condition, that the project for it to get its final certificate of compliance, that offsite mitigation does need to be built. So you would have that cross check there. And if it is built with a different property owner, there are going to need to be legal documents, likely easements, that allow for the stormwater control measures to go in and for them to be maintained. And likely the proponent who is, relying on that offsite mitigation will need self-help measures allowing them to go on and maintain it if the existing owner does not.
And that's going to be a critical issue, is the maintenance, because like if somebody has to drive 20 miles away to maintain a BMP, that should be, it's a requirement right now in the orders of conditions that BMPs be maintained. So that's going to continue to be a requirement, even if it's off-site. So just going to increase the cost of the maintenance, most likely.
Okay, we're getting more and more questions, so I don't think we're going to get to the end. We'll go a couple more minutes here. Let's see. Okay, so Brad Johnson said he confirmed he was looking for particle size distribution, but hearing no requirement. Thanks. Anonymous, I was disappointed to see that the proprietary units, water quality units, are seeming to be discouraged. As someone who works primarily in the city suburbs outside of Boston, which have space constraints, it's very difficult to use a large LED SEM. Furthermore, the guidance for determining TSS removal with this technology has not been updated. And the TSS removal is often subject to peer reviewers, conservation commissioners' opinions. Is there a plan to provide guidance on the use of proprietary units in water quality technology? So I'm not sure who Anonymous is, but there are some new credits provided in the table in the proposed regulations for certain proprietary units, and then a process provided in the stormwater handbook that's similar to the process now. We do know that this is an issue, and it's been one that we had hoped to work with EPA more on. So, I suggest you include that comment in your written comments on the proposed regulations. Dave,
So, just to point out really quickly, Lisa, I know we're limited on time, is proprietary media filters. We're proposing to give credits right through the regulation. It's really the hydrodynamic separator where you might have settling times in the seconds, where we're proposing to just, allow them to be used for pre-treatment, not for treatment.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yeah, there are two categories of proprietary measures in the table. That's in I think it's table 1, I believe is what it's called in the proposed regulations. Dominic Rinaldi, understand Tom's statement about putting SEMs under buildings. Please be aware that this will be a problem in urban environments like Boston and Worcester with lands at a premium. This has previously been the only option to allow development and meet standards. Perhaps look at an exception for certain urban areas similar to the 25-foot riverfront in certain areas. Okay, thank you, Dominic, for that comment. Please put that in your written comments and on the regulations.
Now, we do have setbacks right now in our handbook for building foundations. So this is not really a new requirement. It's an existing requirement. We're proposing to take it out of the handbook and put in the regulations.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Angela Pancioni, why does MassDEP get special treatment, highway-specific considerations, and why are there none for local DPWs? Many Western Mass communities will have difficulties with improvement of existing roadways. We looked at some of the projects that are funded by MassDEP will also be eligible for some of the special considerations. MassDEP has, by far the largest, I believe, lane miles of roadways in the state. And some of those special considerations are available to projects that are funded by DOT, and some of them are very specific to DOT only. For example, maintenance, considerations that only, DOT can commit to. In other words, you would need a commitment from every single municipality for those sorts of things. So that's just a little bit of background on how those came about. Anonymous, will there be a specific gradation particle size distribution of gravel to be considered impervious? Compacted gravel has been included in the definition for impervious surface, but if a gravel does not contain a certain percentage of fines, it could be rather pervious. A clean stone, for example. Dave or Tom?
Well, right now we consider it pervious under the MassDEP wetland regulations. It's the EPA definition that considers it impervious. So I don't know if this is a Liz question.
Liz?
So
We
I
will-
guess, go ahead.
We'll take that under advisement.
Yes, good,
Okay.
good
Thank you for
response.
that. I would put that in your written comments.
But
Whomever.
that's been in the EPA definition, you know, if your town's in MS4, that's something you should already be enforcing through the MS4 permit that EPA has issued to your town.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Hey, folks, there's 142 folks left here. Kudos to everybody who's still here. It's about 3:15, and guess what? There's two more questions, so we're gonna get through them. The first one is there a maximum infiltration rate allowed under the permeability testing? This is a Tom or Dave or Liz comment, whoever can answer that one. Is there a maximum infiltration rate allowed under the permeability testing?
We don't have a max requirement, no.
And there is there's a factor of safety as well. So when you do the
That's true.
testing, in some cases you have to half it, but there's no maximum.
All right, thank you, everyone. And last but not least, we would like to, I'll just read off this this final comment. MACC and MSMCP are hosting a free lunch and learn on a general overview and Q&A on the proposed Wetlands Resilience 1.0 regulations on January 24th from 11:30 to 1. Registration is required. The link to registration has been provided in the Q&A. And I imagine if you go to the MACC website, you would find it there as well. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, everyone who came here, listened, who provided questions. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing your written comments. The comment period closes March 1st, but feel free to come to any of the other information sessions or provide your comments at the public hearings in the upcoming weeks. Thanks very much, everyone.